Hello and welcome to Farm Connections. I'm your host, Dan Hoffman. On today's program, we talk about Minnesota food culture with Minnesota cooks Claudine Arndt. J.R. Roesner of the National Corn Growers Association joins us to discuss the necessary benefits of ethanol, and the University of Minnesota Extension brings us a new Best Practices segment, all today on Farm Connections.
Welcome to Farm Connections with your host, Dan Hoffman.
Farm Connections made possible in part by
Minnesota Corn Growers Association, working to identify and promote opportunities for corn growers, enhance quality of life, and help others understand the value and importance of corn production to America's economy. EDP Renewables North America, owner-operator of Prairie Star and Pioneer Prairie Wind Farms, Minnesota and Iowa. EDPR wind farms and solar parks provide income to farmers and help power rural economies across the continent.
Northern Country Co-op, a full-service cooperative in grain, agronomy, feed, and lumber. For the latest news, job openings, and podcasts, you can go to their website, ncountrycoop.com.
R&S Grain Systems, a family-owned business serving its customers for 50 years with leading designs in the manufacturing of grain handling equipment and grain storage systems. You can call them for a quote today.
Welcome to Farm Connections. We traveled to Winona, Minnesota to a special place, and we have someone that's going to help us tell us about that special place, Claudine Arndt. Welcome to Farm Connections.
Thanks, Dan.
What place is this and what is it all about?
Yeah, so we are at Heirloom Seasonal Bistro in Winona, Minnesota, and it's this wonderful independently owned restaurant that features farm-to-fork food, meaning they source directly from their local farm partners, and everything here is scratch cooked, and it's just such a gem here in Winona.
Well, without trying hard, I think we have the menu right in our background, right?
I think we do. Isn't it beautiful?
It is, and it's like I can see that from anywhere inside of the restaurant. But tell me more about what you do with Minnesota Farmers Union.
Yeah, so with Minnesota Farmers Union, I'm the Director of Membership and Minnesota Cooks, and I've actually worked for them for 11 years on the Minnesota Cooks program, which is the local foods program of the organization. So my colleague Katie Cannon and I have the great privilege every year of highlighting 12 farm-to-table partnerships from around the state of Minnesota. So choosing 12 farmers and then highlighting each of them alongside one of their restaurant partners, or perhaps a cafe or a bakery, or more recently, sometimes distillers and brewers as well.
Well, we were just on a farm that you work with near Dakota, Minnesota, and now we're at the restaurant. What's the synergy? What's the collaborative piece there?
Well, it's just that. It's a collaboration. It's a partnership. So chefs Christy and Gavin from Heirloom Seasonal Bistro here have formed this partnership or this relationship with Darian and Andy from Frickson Family Farms, and they collaborate to offer these amazing farm fresh dishes that you see on the menu behind us.
Claudine, that sounds exciting, but why is it important? So what does it matter?
So we actually have a cheat sheet on one of our websites about all the benefits of local food or buying direct from your farmers. So it's important because it keeps family farmers on the farming. You know, for those farmers who want to earn a living from farming, it helps them have the ability to do so. It helps keep rural areas and communities vibrant. It helps reduce carbon footprints. The food is more nutrient dense. The food is fresher, and so it tastes better. And there's just this whole laundry list of benefits and why it's important, but mainly because you're funneling your dollars directly to family farmers, and you're helping to support their livelihoods.
In addition, the family restaurant.
Yeah, and in addition, small businesses like Heirloom Seasonal Bistro, right, which add just this vibrancy to Winona.
You mentioned fresh. I think of a truck bringing food from, say, the West Coast, 2,000 miles. That doesn't seem to be fresh. You mentioned carbon footprint. How is this remarkably different?
Yeah, this is remarkably different because in some cases the farms are just a few miles away from here. I think the Frickson family farm is maybe 10 or 15 miles from here. And so just think that had a very short distance to travel to get here. And also then the dollars that are passed between Christy and Gavin here at Heirloom Seasonal Bistro and the Fricksons stays circulating in this economy.
Awesome, thank you.
This local economy. Yeah.
You also have a calendar in your hand.
I do.
What's all about that?
Yeah, so this is the Minnesota Cooks calendar. And through the Minnesota Cooks program at Minnesota Farmers Union, we create this calendar every single year. It is such a joy to create this on behalf of the Minnesota Farmers Union. And yeah, it's every month we highlight a partnership, just like the Fricksons and Christy and Gavin at Heirloom Seasonal Bistro. So it's really fun. My colleague Katie is the photographer. We get to travel all around the state. She takes amazing photos that are included in the calendar. I get to interview all of our participants and then write their calendar story, and then all of our participating chefs and cooks and bakers submit a recipe for publication as well. So it's also kind of like a mini cookbook.
Well, thank you for doing that. When we were at the Frickson farm, you signed an autograph, so did Katie, the photographer, and so did the family. So that's on that calendar page in case anybody notices there's some writing on it. But what a neat thing to do to showcase a family, the unsung heroes of our food supply, right?
Right, yeah. And that is what it feels like. It feels like shining the spotlight on some people that normally just don't get enough attention for the really important work they do in the world.
Are you like me? You never want to hear a farmer say, oh, I'm just a farmer?
Yeah. They're scientists, they're mechanics, they're bankers in many cases, or what's the word I'm looking for? Not bankers, but financial advisors. They have this whole skill set, and yeah, they are not just farmers.
It's not easy work.
Yeah.
The calendar led to a book.
It did.
And I happen to notice that you are the author along with Katie being the photographer. What's this book all about?
Yeah, so The Farmer and the Chef grew out of the Minnesota Cooks program. In 2018, we were approached by a publisher who had seen a program that really amplified the work of Minnesota Cooks, and she asked us if we had ever thought about doing a cookbook. And we had, and so it felt like this wonderful invitation to actually pursue an idea that we had had for many years. And so the cookbook is a collection of recipes that had been submitted to the Minnesota Cooks program throughout the 17 years of the program at that time. And at that time, we actually had over 200 recipes that had been submitted to the program. So we had to edit those down and cull many of them out so that we ended up with about 90 recipes in the book. But then, in addition, because we're a farm organization, we really wanted to make sure to bring that farmer story forward throughout the book. Beyond just saying the ingredient for this recipe came from this farm, we really wanted to shine the spotlight on farmers. And so throughout every chapter of the book, there's at least one story about a farm who had at one point been featured in the Minnesota Cooks program. So I think our first chapter, Daybreak, features 4 stories, and then our last chapter, Sweets, as the name implies, it's our dessert recipes. And the story that we have in that chapter is about a very beloved farmer named Greg Reynolds of Riverbend Farm, and it tells the story of how Greg always wanted to farm. He didn't inherit a farm, and so he became a rocket scientist so that he could earn enough money to buy a farm and pursue his dream of farming one day.
Where there's a way, there's a will. Thanks for sharing your story today, Claudine.
Thanks, Dan.
Stay tuned for more on Farm Connections.
Farm Connections Best Practices brought to you by
This is Brad Carlson, Extension Educator with the University of Minnesota Extension, and here's today's Best Practice segment. Everyone's aware that the year 2021 was extraordinarily dry. Historically, we would see following a dry year large concentrations of nitrate showing up in our surface waters, and obviously it's coming off of the land. And so really what's happening is we have large amounts of residual nitrogen carrying over from the previous crop year. The reason for that is that the loss processes of nitrogen are water-based, and when it's really dry, we just simply don't lose it, and therefore nitrogen accumulates, not just simply during the growing season, but even following the growing season. As our crops mature somewhere in the vicinity of Labor Day or a couple weeks afterwards, but things don't really cool down until we get to late October, early November. We continue to see nitrogen mineralizing out of soil organic matter through that time period, and then it accumulates in the soil. Well, this is a perfect situation where we would look at taking a soil nitrate test. Historically, we would recommend taking a soil nitrate test in situations, one like we have now, where it has been extremely dry, and then also in fields that have a long-term manure history. So very specifically, corn following corn, anywhere this year, if you're growing corn next year, following corn this year, we will be particularly looking for whether we've got applied fertilizer from this last year that's still there and potentially available for next year. And then corn following soybeans, where we have a manure history, where we would also expect high levels of nitrogen to be mineralized out of the soil organic matter. Now, it's possible we might also see high levels of nitrogen just in any ordinary circumstance of corn following soybeans, but that's not necessarily part of our recommendation, but it won't hurt you anything if you want to take that sample. The recommendation is to take a sample down to 2 feet deep, because nitrates are mobile in the soil profile. It's got to go much deeper than what we would normally take for a P or K soil test, and to try and take that sample as close to the time of crop use or planting as we can. So in south central Minnesota, you're primarily looking at taking that sample probably in late March or early April, and then adjusting your nitrogen rate according to the amount of residual nitrogen that's found in the soil. Western Minnesota, you can take it in the fall, but recognize that if it gets really wet in the spring, your number may no longer be good. Look for the University of Minnesota Extension's website, type in soil nitrate test, and you'll find the chart to interpret your test results. This is Brad Carlson with our Best Practices segment.
Welcome to Farm Connections. Today, J.R. Roesner is with us from the National Corn Growers Association. Welcome, J.R.
Thank you.
So tell us about the work you do with the corn growers.
So the corn growers works to enhance the value of corn for corn farmers. We work hard to make sure that farming practices are protected, that global markets and markets around the country are being developed to have an avenue for our crop to go, and to provide an incentive and to provide farmers with a voice to be heard in Washington.
Why is that important, JR?
The voice in Washington is very important as we navigate the political landscape and everything that goes into that. Having a voice in Washington and being at the table when these decisions are being made, whether it's energy policy or crop inputs or farm bill, it's vitally important for us to be there and to have that voice and to be heard and to make those connections with our legislators and administration officials that need to hear what's going on in our industry.
And of course, National Corn Growers is a grassroots organization that calls upon the farmers to help. So I'm guessing you farm also.
I do.
Tell us about that farm.
So I farm in Southwest Indiana, fifth generation farm. I currently farm with my brother, and we are all row crop. We grow corn, soybeans, and wheat, and a lot of what we grow corn-wise goes into food grade, and about the other half goes into ethanol production.
Well, there's a lot of discussion nationally and internationally about fuel and energy, and it's crucial to our country we have a good supply of energy. What are the corn growers doing to help us with that?
Well, we're working hard to make sure that we have access to the consumer through higher blends of ethanol, we are working hard to protect the markets we have. We're also looking at the Next Generation Fuels Act, which will provide us the opportunity to supply the country with higher blends of ethanol and meet those carbon reduction goals and be that sustainable fuel that this country is desiring.
Well, you hit a key word with consumers, sustainable. How is your farm and how is corn production sustainable?
Corn farming is very sustainable. Corn is a great carbon sequestration tool. We're also using different farming techniques, enhanced technology, more precise use of inputs to make sure that we are meeting those carbon reduction goals that the consumer is desiring. And that is shown through ethanol and the benefits it can provide. We're also working closely with other key stakeholders to make sure that we're meeting and providing the sustainability goals that everyone is desiring in this country.
What's happening in jet fuel propulsion?
So sustainable aviation fuel has become a great topic here in the last few months. The sustainable aviation fuel and the market that it will provide will be a great benefit to corn farmers across the country. With corn's ability to sequester carbon, with the enhancements at the ethanol plants to provide carbon reduction benefits and meet those carbon reduction goals that the airline and the airline consumers are desiring.
JR, you've mentioned blending rates with ethanol. Can you elaborate on that just a little bit? Why is it important and what does it mean?
So blending rates are important to the U.S. farmers. Currently, we almost all fuel, all gasoline sold in the U.S. with an E10 blend. We have worked very hard to provide access to E15, and the administration has allowed that through some of the orders that have been done this summer. The next key, and then we also have 85, which is used in flex fuel vehicles. As we look forward, especially into the Next Generation Fuels Act, we look at moving into those higher blends of E20 and E30.
Why is it important for farmers to sustain a profit?
Well, without a profit, it's hard to stay in business. And as we look forward, especially with the inflation and some of the stuff we've seen with prices here recently, it's even more important for us to be mindful of our inputs, to be mindful of our production, to provide the corn that this country needs, all while we are providing the opportunity for our farmers to remain a viable production for corn.
Well, I'm pretty sure it's the same in Indiana as in Minnesota, but our Minnesota farmers, when they make a profit, it goes into their family living, but they also reinvest it in their community. How does that happen in Indiana? Give me an example.
It happens. It definitely happens in Indiana, and it happens across the country. Farmers are great supporters of their rural communities. In Indiana, we see a lot of farmers investing in whether it be volunteer fire department, the local community festival, providing money for the local PTO for their schools, different things, whether it be not only monetary donations, but maybe some equipment or some labor that can be provided to different organizations. Farmers have always been very generous with their money and are great supporters of their rural communities.
Great examples. And when farmers have money, they reinvest in equipment and inputs and sustain the entire community. Actually, nationally, correct?
Correct.
Give us an example of what happens to corn when it leaves your farm. Does it all go within 10, 20 miles or does it go worldwide?
So on my farm, I'm very close to the Ohio River. So I have some that goes to the river. I have a fair amount that goes into an ethanol plant. And then I have a pretty significant amount that goes into a food facility that grinds it for flour, Azteca milling. And if you've had Taco Bell, you've probably had some Southwest Indiana corn.
Thank you, JR, for your interview time, and have a safe harvest, please.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Stay tuned for more on Farm Connections.
The phone rings, 8 o'clock on a September morning. The voice of the smiling caller says, "Hey, JoAnn, there's a box here, a box with holes in it. Got your name on it." Oh my goodness. I throw on my hat and I drive to the post office. The woman with the recognizable voice comes out with the box. She says, "Here, have fun." I hold the box up to my ear, but there's no sound. Oh no. Are they alive in there? I mean, they've been in this box coming from California for 2.5 days now. No food, no water. What am I going to see when I open this box? But I hurry home. I open it. I peer inside. And there are 2 little black Cayuga sisters, 2 little black ducks looking up at me and squinting at the first light they've ever seen at 3 days old. I scoop them out of the box, 1 in each hand. Furry little creatures. "Hello, you're Annie. And this one's Nettie." Never too early to start teaching names to your animals. I dip their beaks into water to teach them how to drink, and they take it from there. Oh, that baby chick feed feels pretty good in empty tummies. Their first 2 weeks are spent in a Rubbermaid tote in my bathroom under a heat lamp. Pretty soon they get a little too rambunctious for that tote, and I put them in a playpen right here in my office beside my computer. But that doesn't last so long because they get a little too rambunctious for that too. And pretty soon it's time to transition them to their own special little insulated house in my garage under a heat lamp. Now, telling them apart is impossible. They're identical sisters. But there is a way. Since I'm the mom now, there is a way to tell them apart. Annie is so timid. She follows me so closely that I almost step on her, so I have to be really careful. But she doesn't like me to hold her. Nettie, on the other hand, is bold. She fiercely protects her favorite treat, mealworms. Oh, she loves those. She also loves for me to hold her. It's their 5-month birthday. Their 5-month birthday. And on that day, I think they are as surprised as I am in that they have laid their first egg. And when you have a black duck, you get a black egg. Well, just the shell, of course. What a shock. Annie and Nettie are almost 9 months old now. They have the run of the backyard that's fenced. They love playing with my dog Charlie and my cat Mindy. Sometimes it's kind of a 3-ring circus out there. But other times, when they come, when I call them, I'll say, "Here, Annie, here, Nettie." They come running. And if I want them really quickly, I just say, "Annie, Nettie, treat." And they come running faster than ever. You know me. I'm the farm kid who never wanted to grow up. And there's just something about having your backyard filled with a dog, a cat, and 2 ducks. It is so peaceful. I have to have animals. They do bring peace to my life, as I'll bet they bring peace to your life too. Nettie came to meet you all. Usually she tucks her beak inside my shirt. Today I think she's a little nervous. And at only 9 months old, she's already turning a bit white. Are you getting old already, Nettie? She makes happy little sounds, but she loves to be held. Maybe you would like a duck.
From farm to fork, food makes the world go round, and there is a culture of cultivation behind the movement to make even the most basic of foods a reason to get together with friends and loved ones. I'm Dan Hoffman. Thanks for watching Farm Connections.